All right, and I'm live. How's it going, everybody? Looks like a few people are here already. Hello, Theodoxus and Uberbinge, Dev Souza. Hey, how's it going? Been a while since I've streamed. This is the first time live streaming since I got my office back and set up, and it took me a while to get everything set up. So sorry about that. Thank you, Tyfly. Appreciate that. I've kind of missed. I've missed doing this as well. I think it got to the point where I was like, I had spent enough time not streaming that it felt like it was a bigger hurdle to get back into it. So hopefully after today I'll start doing some more. All right. So today we're not going to do anything that exciting, I don't think. But I thought it would be cool to just kind of be available to answer questions if people had them. I know, there's like a lot of questions around the new beta release, and not everyone got their questions answered. And anyway, just if anyone has anything, wants to chat, just throw it in the chat and I'll try to answer it. What I kind of thought we could do is, in the meantime, work on just migrating. This is like the project management app, which I haven't touched in a while. This is what we were working on in the stream late last year, and I thought it might be useful for some people to see me go through an upgrade. This is a pretty small app, so it's not going to be that significant, but figure I'm going to need to do it anyway. Teo's Adventure says, "Hey Luna, does the beta release mean accessibility tooling has gotten better?" Yeah, definitely it's gotten better. I would kind of say it's still not 100%, but it's like it doesn't work perfectly in all cases, and we're still kind of tracking those cases down and making it better. But I know the team that's working on that has been working pretty hard and making a lot of headway. So there'll still be some like changes made in beta, but like it'll be like bug fixes and improvements, not not like big sweeping changes in that department. Uber Binge says, "What's the rendering engine of Compose on Android?" So Compose uses the platform Canvas, which is Skia essentially, but it's the same canvas that the platform uses. We do that so that we don't have to bundle Skia like as part of the library for APK size and stuff like that. Most Java says, "Hi, is there any plan to let Compose take over XML native views in the future and deprecate them?" Not sure what you mean by like take over. Like if you mean if those views would be implemented by Compose, then no. However, as Compose matures, there some things may get deprecated or just I don't even know if they would get deprecated, because it's like it's part of the platform, but some things may not get maintained to the same level. But a lot of the new development in terms of improvements and additions and stuff like that in the UI space is going to be done in Compose. Tyfly asks, "Is this a pure Compose app you're working on? It would be good to see more examples of integrating with the standard views as well." Yeah, so the app that I have on screen here is a pure Compose app. There is a Jet sample app that I think is made for like showing the integrations. Let me see if I can pull that up. I forget which one it is. I think it might be Owl. Is that right? Nope. Does it show it? Oh, okay, here we go. Composing existing app samples to see how Compose and view-based UIs can coexist. Check out these samples. Yeah, so TV is a great example. This is made by Chris Baines. He's spent a lot of time migrating TV over to Compose, and so and this is like, you know, a real solid app. So like if you want to see kind of how he's done that over time, this would be a great place to start. And then this is like an actual sample app, but it's meant to demonstrate like the view compatibility stuff. Coding Pizza asks, what is the feature of ExoPlayer in Compose world? I don't know exactly, but you know, I think, you know, the bulk of ExoPlayer is kind of view system independent, and you know, building a, well, so one, using the existing ExoPlayer and building a composable that uses that, using the Android View interop composable that we have, that would be pretty easy to do, and I'm sure some people have already done it. But the ExoPlayer team might want to build their own officially. That you know, I don't know. I think ExoPlayer uses Service View under the hood, so you know, there might be some non-trivial like performance improvements or like considerations there, but I'm not really the right person to speak to what those would be. And I haven't personally communicated with that team very much, but I'm sure someone has. I'm just not, you know, included in all those conversations. But you should be able to use ExoPlayer today with Compose if you want to. It just it'll be still leveraging the existing view. Let's see. Sergey says, how's it going with work on the shared element transition API? Yeah, it's a good question. So I think at one point on the stream, I kind of talked about the composition as a value API that we were working on, which was probably going to feed into how shared element transitions would work and stuff like that. Those APIs are still coming, but and shared element transitions is like still a big priority. They're not done yet, and so they didn't really make the beta cut, which means that you'll, because of our API stability and stuff like that, you'll probably start to see some of these APIs come in the relatively near future, but they'll come in marked as experimental APIs, and so then they probably won't go stable until Compose goes 1.0, but until Compose goes 1.1. And so any new experimental features that get added, they're essentially slated for 1.1 now. And I have no idea when that'll be, but if like this type of thing is really important to you, it's probably going to be available in some form with experimental APIs. And just like we were with the like the alphas and stuff like that, like we'll definitely be interested in getting people's feedback on how those are, you know, working for their use cases and stuff. So that's kind of the status. We were really hoping that we'd be able to get this into beta, so in time for 1.0, but it just, you know, timing didn't work out. So that's the status there. Let's see. In comparison to pre-Jetpack compose times, should we expect any significant APK size changes? Yeah, so this is a great question. You know, APK size is really important. It's important to us as well. So the numbers that I've seen is like if you look at like a Hello World app with Compose and you know, build it with R8 and stuff like that, you're looking at like roughly a 200K APK size. That's that's sort of on the order of magnitude of what you'd expect for adding compose to an app. It really depends on how much of the surface area you use of like material and all the widgets that are provided in the runtime and stuff like that. The more you use, the more the APK is going to grow. But yeah, it's something on that order, and just really important to mention that using some sort of a whole program optimization like App Shrinker, like R8 is going to be really important here, primarily because Compose results in a very large number of Lambda classes getting generated, and R8 will merge a lot of those classes together. And so that'll result in pretty big reduction in APK size whenever you're using Compose. So it's important to do those steps. Let's see. Elizer says, now that Compose is in beta, is the package name decision final? Yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say that the package name of Compose is not going to change, at least not for any 1.x release of Compose. So if that decision was going to change, I wouldn't be holding my breath for it, I guess. Like it would be in the longer term time horizon. Let's see. Gabe Souza says, would be nice to see an update of the dog food movie app if the animation app got easier. Oh yeah, that's a good point. So maybe that'll be next stream or something. I just picked out the project management app here, but not only like migrating it to get it to compile, but actually seeing what kind of new APIs we can use to refactor some of the work that we did. That would be cool. Are any Google apps using Compose in production currently? Probably shouldn't comment on this question. I think the answer is yes, but I'm not entirely sure. Mush Java about automation tools like Appium. How are they going to work with Compose? That's a good question. I haven't actually tried using Appium or anything with this. We use we integrate with Espresso pretty well, but like all of these tools really depends on how they're implemented. I'm guessing that they come with like a fair amount of Vue implementation details built in, and so if they wanted to support Compose, they might have to like add Compose support to them, so to where they know how to look for Compose's like accessibility tags and stuff like that, and so now that Compose's API is stable, I would assume a lot of libraries like Appium and stuff like that are kind of going to more aggressively start adding Compose support, since it's no longer a moving target. Afsal says, how easy or difficult would it be to build a map view in Compose? I guess it depends what you mean by building it in Compose. Like, my guess is that if you actually ventured to like build a map view from scratch, that most of it wouldn't actually use Compose. You'd probably end up just drawing to a canvas directly, and just having a lot of kind of map specific data structures that end up recording these things into canvas operations and stuff like that. Doesn't mean it would be impossible. It's just, I'm just I'm not sure that Compose would bring you that much benefit. But I don't know. I mean, like, if you're thinking about, will map view, like the Google Maps created map view, be like ported to Compose or something. It very well might be, but again, like I think that they would be more, you know, most of that is going to be targeting, you know, something like Skia directly, and not like the outer view layer toolkit. That would be my guess. Let's see. Gosh, I'm having trouble keeping up with these questions. Let's see. Tim asks, oh no, he says, hey Leland, thanks for the awesome content. You're welcome. Thanks, Tim. Regarding the animation API, are you happy with the current state? I was a bit blown away by the decision diagram, seeing all the different APIs. Yeah, so there have been a lot of recent changes in the animation APIs, and I've been aware of some of them, but not like I haven't been super involved in all of the API decisions. But some of the things that I know got changed, I was definitely a fan of. You know, like so there were some kind of rough edges on the earlier APIs with like things like building prop keys and stuff that I really didn't like. And I think that the changes to the transition API kind of ended up going more in a direction that like I was used to thinking in, which was like, you know, less about specific states and more about kind of like how these individual values mapped out, and it kind of it removed some of the pitfalls of the older API, where you know, I felt like there was kind of an impedance mismatch with Compose. But that said, I don't have enough context here to really say. I'd like to play around with some of the APIs more myself, and I just haven't had a chance to, because they're so fresh, and I've been working on a lot of other things. So, you know, I know a lot of thought went into them. So, you know, I think if you're a little bit shocked, you know, from the changes, you know, I'm hoping that shock is from the you know, how different the API is, and not where the API landed. But it sounds like maybe your concern is more about how many different kind of APIs there are. In that regard, you know, I think that when we're building these APIs, I think it's easy for two things to look like two completely different APIs, but I know that a lot of the animation APIs are just built on top of each other. And so they're not like entirely different animation systems. They're just, you know, sort of abstractions on top of the primitives that animation provides you in Compose. And I think if you start looking at it with that lens, that it may start to feel like less like a decision matrix and more just like okay, this animation system provides me with these different APIs, but it's all the same system. Anyway, sorry for the long-winded answer. Hopefully that helps. Skycolor says how to make a drop down with Compose, and why is it hard? Good question. I think we have a drop-down API now, but I'm not that familiar with it. So I think it got added recently, but I could be wrong. Is that the particular API you're talking about, or are you talking about it being hard to build one from scratch? Teodoxus says, what's the most basic app for a beginner on Compose? What do you mean exactly? Do you mean like what's the simplest program that I could write? In that case, you know, it's probably like you know, activity on create, set content, text, hello world. You know, that's sort of like the hello world of Compose. If that wasn't your question, let me know. Pengain4 says, does the Compose team have plans to improve tooling performance? Many people don't have latest MacBooks or expensive laptops, and it's a real pain sometimes. Yeah, totally agree. I mean, the short answer to your question is yes. You know, I think performance is top of mind for some of these tools, but you know, sometimes that kind of happens after initial creation, and we're gonna have to work with these things and make them faster. But yeah. Pycero TV says, will Compose be stable in 2021? Is it possible? I saw that Compose runtime is almost stable, but other things seem not. Yeah, so this is the stated roadmap right now. So the we plan to hit a 1.0 milestone sometime this year. So, and we're currently on track to do that. You know, exact date, can't really say, but you know, us hitting beta was, you know, big part of that. You know, now the APIs are stable, which actually, you know, I think there's kind of this effect that we're seeing where, like, when the APIs were free to change, we kept thinking about, you know, is this the right API, or you know, how could we change this API to be a better shape? And now that we're in the land of API stability, it's less about that. Now it's about how do we make this API more robust? How do we make it more performant? How do we fix the bugs that are there and stuff like that? And so now is the time where you're going to see a lot of the you know, refinements and polishing go into the runtime, whereas before it was a lot about just kind of getting these broad brushstrokes into the toolkit so that we could actually build something. Let's see. Nebula Smoothie says, hi Leland, just want to say congrats to you and your team for the beta release. Total game changer for Android. Thanks. Let's see. Sometimes the auto formatting on Compose code is weird. Is that on Android Studio Team's plate? Yeah, it's definitely part of the picture. I don't know how much I think someone asked about this before. I think it might have been you, I'm not sure, but you know, if you're not aware of a bug that's filed against this, you know, feel free to file a bug. You know, you can ping me if you want me to make sure that it gets routed correctly. But yeah, I mean, we're going to be adding you know, more and more support to Android Studio that you know, is sort of more Compose aware, and formatting ought to be part of that. It's a little bit trickier because formatting is one of those things where it starts to get into the territory of, should we actually be making different decisions to format Compose code versus just normal Kotlin code? And why are those decisions different? And so sometimes the answer to that question is, well, actually, this is actually logic that should go into just the Kotlin formatter, regardless if it's composable functions or not. Like, this seems like the right format to use in this case, and so then it might result in us contributing upwards towards the Kotlin formatter directly. Let's see. Any plans to make running the UI tests without an emulator at some point in the future? Yeah, this is already possible. So we do this a lot on our we do this in AOSP, so you can check out some of the tests that we run to make that happen. You know, not all of the tests we do are device tests. Definitely this area is going to expand over time, and it's unclear, at least to me, how that factors into like the work that JetBrains is doing with Compose Desktop, and you know, there's a lot of stuff there, but this is already sort of, proven to be possible. There's just, work left to make it more and more useful over time. So Nebula Smoothie says, how did you all arrive at using suspend functions for gesture detection animation APIs? It's a good question. I think a lot of this was sort of evangelized by Adam Powell, and sort of, reframing how we think about gestures and animations and stuff like that. And, a lot of this ended up happening late because there was such a long period of time where Compose was using the IR backend, but the IR backend didn't yet have support for suspend functions, and so that that kind of created some weird situations where like there were APIs that we probably would have made suspend from the get-go if we had the ability to, but we didn't. Irinde says, thanks, I missed the beginning. Do we have a timeline for 1.0? Yeah, so the timeline that I can say publicly is that we plan to go 1.0 sometime this year. Tim says, really like the usage of suspend functions and animations and gestures. It clicked really fast for me. That's cool. I'm glad to hear that. Mashtava says, how would you compare Compose to the Flutter UI toolkit? Yeah, it's a good question. So there's a lot of ways to compare them, I guess. Like, they both work on very similar paradigms. So they're both like kind of component-based declarative, toolkits. And they both have a very similar mental model in terms of, building a tree as a function of state and things like that. There are some big differences. Like Flutter, Flutter works a lot like React in that you have this build function. It would be, render in React, and you return this tree data structure that React calls the virtual DOM or the element tree, and Flutter calls the element tree. And Compose took a different approach here. We actually use the execution of your code to define that tree, and so it's sort of like being an extra level of declarative in that your actual code structure is what determines the structure of the tree. So like you couldn't actually imperatively build up one of these trees in Compose, whereas like you could in React. It would just be weird for you to do that. And I also think that Compose is like a little bit more in the realm of like a language feature with the way that we've implemented it with the compiler, and that has some interesting implications. If you want to kind of go a little bit higher level, there are some big differences in the API surface. Like, Flutter has like different base classes for like stateful widget and not and stuff like that, and we don't. They also Flutter has like, you kind of, one of the big differences is how Flutter sort of builds up their, they have a lot of like single layout widgets or single element widgets, which is like, they have like center, for instance. Like center is something where you pass a single widget to center and it'll center it. And they do that because they have parameters for the widget that you can specify, okay, my children have one child or n children or whatever, and that they can express that in the type system. And we do things a little bit differently, where we allow you to pass a like children as a lambda, which is it's kind of equivalent, but it you know, it may sound a bit weird for those two things to be equivalent. But because we're modeling it as a function, you can't really express whether it's a single element or multiple, because it can be either. And so that resulted in some different API structure that we needed to do. Like, so we ended up with some of these concepts like centering and stuff like that. For compose, you would end up doing on modifiers, and Flutter doesn't really have an equivalent API. Basically, their modifiers are sort of like, you can think of them as sort of like single child widgets. So there's some differences there. And then also there's some obvious kind of real high level differences where like Flutter works in its own VM. So it's like sort of like a sandboxed area where you write Dart code, and that Dart code works, it's a VM, so it's a different memory space than the actual platform runs on. And that's very different from how Compose works. And so in Compose, you can access the same memory that the platform does without paying any sort of like serialization costs and stuff like that. And so that's a big advantage in a lot of areas. But that also means like, so you know, Flutter made that choice because it makes it really practical to package up that VM and then put it on other platforms like iOS. And so that's how they're able to do that. So, you know, those are trade-offs. Yeah, anyway, I could probably talk about that forever, but if you have any specific questions about the difference, feel free to ask a more specific question. But okay, let's see. Greeny says, would there be a reason if my app always crashes with a class not found exception? Composable method tester preview not found when I try to deploy a preview on my device. Sorry, I don't know if I can answer this question directly. I'm not that familiar with how the preview deploys work, but you should file a bug if you're not able to get that to work. Please file a bug. Simulator performance hasn't improved much over the last few years. Any plans for that? I don't know. I'm not sort of plugged into the roadmap for those teams. So yeah, I don't know. Okay, how do I now go back and write another recycler view and not feel bad about it? Lazy list simplicity is just too good. Yeah, I'm really glad. I'm like, you know, it makes me happy to see comments like that. All right. I'm editing my last question. Which application on GitHub is easier for us to understand and compose? I don't know. I think let's see, going back to the sample apps here. I mean, honestly, these are all great. You know, I think like Jet News was like the first one that was, you know, worked on. So, you know, they're gonna, like, in this README, there's a lot of nice stuff in here. So I think it'll answer those questions for you. Like, you know, they talk about how complex it is and what kind of things it showcases. So I would kind of use these descriptions to make that determination. Let's see. What's the best way in Compose when I click a button and call a suspend function? I want to navigate to the next page when it's finished having a top level state, perhaps. I'm not sure I understand the question. I think what you're asking is like you want to be able to have a suspend function where like, so basically you'd have like navigate as a suspend API, and then it would return a value, and that value would return, like it would yield whenever the that page that you navigated to like returned a result. Really great question. It sounds like a pretty reasonable thing to do. I haven't tried it off the top of my head, but I know that there was some recent work done for the launch activity for result APIs and integrating those with Compose. And so I would look for that. I think some of those just launched with beta, and so see what those look like. I think they might end up in a different package. Anyway, maybe ping me on Twitter or something about this after the stream. I'll try and dig it up, because I think it's a pretty good question. So Chow Tuzang says, is there any good source to dig into the Kotlin compiler plugin? I noticed Compose compiler is using quite a number of extensions. Yeah, unfortunately, the answer to this is kind of no. There's not a lot of documentation to help people get started with Kotlin compiler plugins. It was kind of a painful process for me and our team to sort of learn all these things. It's a big code base. I mean, luckily we were able to communicate with JetBrains to have some questions answered, but a lot of it is just digging through the code to figure out how that works. So sorry, I don't have a better answer there. Nebula Smoothie says, I'm definitely loving the direction of treating gestures as suspend functions. Conceptually, intuitively, it makes a lot of sense to read different gestures and things in different coroutines. Cool. Glad you feel that way. Do you think at some point Compose will be a Kotlin language feature supporting all Kotlin platforms? I don't know. I mean, I certainly like thinking about the idea. Like, it would kind of be like a dream of mine, right, to contribute something like that to a language. And actually, I think like, it's sort of like aspirations. I think it would be really cool to see an entirely different language, like a language other than Kotlin, implement composable functions on their own. Like that would kind of complete the circle of this idea of composable functions being useful. Whether or not this will happen with Kotlin, that's a really good question. I think we still have a lot to prove in order for that to happen. And there's a long way to go. So I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but it's cool to think about. Jay Pargam says, Compose have hot reload. Not in the sense that you're probably thinking of, but we are thinking around what we can do to speed up like iteration in development, and there's a lot of interesting tricks that we can play by we've got some kind of full stack integration with Android Studio and Compose and the compiler and stuff like that, and so we're exploring a lot of different avenues about how this could work. We just released live literals, which is sort of like a real baby version of this sort of direction, where we're if you make edits to source code that end up modifying some literal values in your source code, in certain cases we'll just kind of pipe those changes to the runtime directly, and everything will recompose properly and stuff like that. And there's more in that direction that we want to do that might start feeling this way, but yeah. Okay. All right, there's some other communication here. I'm just reading through the questions. Okay. So Sala McHugh says, is there any update on doing anything to separate the name of the backend of Compose from the UI part? Exactly what Jake Wharton talked about in the link. Is it something that is even being considered? So yeah, I mean, this conversation, I guess, like, isn't new. You know, it's something we've been talking about for a long time, and you know, a lot of these decisions have really far-reaching effects, and some of them good, some of them bad. You know, I think Jake did a good job of pointing out some of the bad effects of the decision that we made. And so I don't think this is gonna change. You know, again, at least not anytime soon. And you know, I definitely agree with Jake, and you know, in a lot of the points that he made, but you know, ultimately this is the choice we made. And you know, a big reason for part of it was we felt it might be confusing for users to have this kind of separation between the runtime and compiler and the toolkit, and when to an Android developer it kind of really feels like one thing. But you know, obviously that comes at the cost of people doing non-Android things like Jake is doing. So there's definitely trade-offs in any choice we made, but I don't think the choice is gonna change anytime soon. Hey Leland, is there support for scoping a view model to a composable now? Yes, so there's a view model function in Compose, and there used to be some kind of issues with it, and a lot of those have been fixed, and so that might be what you're referring to, but that method is there now, and it should work pretty well for you. Is the Compose team interested in providing an alternative to Navigation Compose? Maybe something where you don't have to declare your nav graph at a time, or is this something you figure will be covered by the community? It's certainly not in our immediate roadmap, but something, you know, that we could end up doing long term. We're not really sure. You know, so I don't know. No immediate plans, but this is definitely an area where if people are not happy with Navigation Compose, you know, I'm interested to see what kind of alternative solutions people can come up with in userland. You know, navigation's not an easy thing, and so I don't think that a navigation solution should be treated lightly. There are a lot of corner cases that you need to make sure that you solve correctly, or else you know, ultimately your users are going to suffer. So you know, with that caveat of, like, you know, make sure that if you do choose a custom navigation solution, that it's robust enough to handle your business needs. But I'm really interested in what kind of novel solutions people come up with here. I mean, Navigation Compose was built to interop with an existing navigation solution instead of being a sort of compose first navigation solution from the get-go. And you know, some of you may know I've actually built some navigation libraries for non-compose things, like around React Native and React. And so, you know, this is definitely an area I'm interested in as well. I'm curious to see what people come up with. Is there an architectural layer about Compose to share with us? No, can you draw one for us? After studying Compose.runtime package, my understanding about Compose is better now. I guess an architectural overview is kind of what they're asking for here. Yeah, so this is the link, the Picero TV link. This is for Flutter. There is a similar diagram. I'm not sure where it is now. I think, you know, I think there's a similar diagram put into one of Romagi's talk, maybe from Alpha. It's like, you know, the compose overview talk from when was that? It was from ADS last year, I guess. Oh no, it was post ADS, wasn't it? I don't remember. Anyway, look for Romagi's talk. I think he might have a diagram like that in there. That'd probably be a good start for you. Could frameworks such as Kotlin Native and React Native benefit from Compose? Interesting question. So Kotlin Native and React Native are two very different things. So I think the answer is going to be different for both. So let's start with React Native. I think, you know, there's a really interesting kind of path of exploration here for React Native. I tried to talk about this a little bit in a talk I gave at a React Native conference, but I didn't really get too deep into it. But I think that, you know, as Android starts to move more towards Compose, it'll be really React Native will be in an interesting spot, because right now React Native is like this declarative toolkit, just like Compose, but it's targeting under the hood a non-declarative UI toolkit, which is the Android view system. And interestingly, React is really built to like map onto a toolkit like that, right? And so to build a tree of views. And so, you know, React does this for the DOM on the web, and they do it for views on Android. What gets interesting is when kind of all the latest and greatest widgets and stuff for Android are built for Compose, they're going to be as composables, and like mapping a composable to a React component. It sounds like it would work pretty well because they follow a similar paradigm, but actually, technically, to me at least, it sounds really difficult. And I think that it sounds possible, but definitely not trivial. And so I think that they may have to do some investigations to, you know, figure out how to map React Native properly onto Compose in a way that makes sense for them. And I'm curious to see, you know, what they come up with, or, you know, if we collaborate on that or something, you know, I don't know. That'll be interesting. And so I'm not sure how much React Native can really benefit from that. But it may be something that they have to do just to kind of stay current with Android. The other part of your question was about Kotlin Native, which that's kind of a whole different thing. So that's sort of the question of like, okay, you know, what Kotlin Native does is it allows for Kotlin code to be compiled into, you know, code that can be executed in, for instance, an iOS device. And then they provide like sort of a linking layer to run, you know, Objective-C and Swift code and stuff like that. How Compose can end up leveraging this or working in this environment, you know, I think there's a lot left to be explored there. You know, that all sounds very interesting to me. I know some people have played around with this, and so, you know, can Kotlin Native benefit from Compose? Like, you know, I don't know, maybe, right? Like, so if someone built like you know, really solid, you know, bindings for Compose mapping onto like an iOS device or like a UI kit or something like that, then that would mean that there's a pretty compelling reason to use Kotlin Native for that purpose, versus using something like Swift or something. So So that could be interesting, you know, so we'll see. Is the Compose compiler smart enough to provide code suggestions? I'm not sure what you mean by that. So Skycolor, can you elaborate? Like, what do you mean by code suggestions? Let's see. Sergey says, could you elaborate on the new live literals feature? Yeah. So this is something I worked on pretty directly, but what live literals does is it looks at the code that you wrote, and if you're leveraging this feature, what happens is that at compile time, it will find constants in your file, like constant literals, and it'll transform that code into something slightly different that returns, you know, that value at runtime. But it doesn't just use the literal directly. What it does is it wraps that literal in a state object, and then sets up a communication pathway for Android Studio to then let the runtime know when that literal changed in your editor. And when it does change, it just, you know, basically updates that state value. And because of our state observation system that Compose has set up, what will happen as a result is the sections of composable code that used that constant will recompose, and you'll get sort of the new UI as a result. There's still some limitations of this feature, and it's, you know, stuff that I'd like to improve on over time, and so the sort of number of situations where this feature ends up getting leveraged will grow over time. Let's see. Salamaki says, wait, you can scope VMs to composables now. Are there view models to compose? Are there any examples on GitHub that use that and not scoping using navigation library but manually doing it? Yeah, there are some samples doing this. I think some of them got released today. I'm not sure, but go check out the doc site. I think there's one on like architecture, compose architecture or something like that. I think it has an example of this. I see. So Skycolor wants to know if the Compose compiler can make suggestions to like do this, and the performance might be a little bit better. Maybe, but probably we would end up doing that at a different layer. So it'd probably be separate from the compiler itself. And so the Android Studio, we might start creating like some diagnostics or lint warnings or something where if you write code in a certain way and we detect that there might be a better way, then maybe we'll suggest you do that or something like that. Would you recommend someone who's starting on Android Dev today to go straight to Jetpack Compose? You know, I see this question get asked a lot, and I think it's a difficult one to answer because it depends on context, right? So if you're just getting started in Android development, you know, I think there's no question now that the future of Android development is going to have Compose be a big part of it, right? And so I think no matter what, it's probably valuable to start learning Compose. But if you're just getting started, like, what does that mean? Does that mean that you're trying to get hired? You know, and if you are, or maybe you just started at a company, right? Like if you're, you know, if just getting started means that you just came out of university and you started on the, you know, Android team at a big company, well, then the answer is only if they use Compose, right? Like at that point, the best thing for you to learn is the tools that the company's already using. And if that's not Compose, then, you know, don't prioritize Compose in that case. And so it just depends. And then if you're like, you know, a seasoned developer at a big company, maybe it does make sense for you to learn Compose so that you can then use that information to inform your company on whether or not you should switch and all that stuff. But if you're just trying to, you know, learn new things, or you know, you want to be marketable or something, you know, I think, you know, some people will probably start looking for Compose experience in, you know, job postings and stuff. But I'm not advocating for people to do that. Like I think, you know, you should hire smart, capable people, not people that have a particular set of experience, particularly for things that are brand new. But anyway, hopefully that answers the question. I think it's a surprisingly hard question to answer because, you know, it just sort of depends. Let's see. How do we opt into the string literal feature? Any documentation on it? I don't think there's documentation on it yet. I think when you use Studio for the first time, there's supposed to be some sort of little message that kind of tells you about it, but I think it's available somewhere to turn it on directly. In the Kotlin Link Slack channel, there's a message on it. Hold on one second. Okay. I'm gonna have to go in a few minutes here, but this has been a ton of fun. We didn't get any migration done at all. I've just been answering questions the whole time, but hopefully that was you know, what people wanted, or that was useful to people. I'll answer, you know, a few more questions here, but yeah, I think if you go into the settings and you go to live literals, I think there's a way to turn it on, but I think it might be on by default. Not 100% sure, to be honest. I was hoping that we would cover that in this stream, but we didn't get to it. Let's see. Abdel Kareem says, will we ever get a way to build UI easier in Android Studio like we have currently in XML, drag and drop, especially for constraint layout? Maybe, like, there's definitely people experimenting in this space, and you know, like we've talked about it. You know, there's not like, you know, some looming big feature or something in this direction, but I think maybe it's possible. I think that by and large, the Compose kind of moves in a direction that is a little less drag and drop friendly, and promotes a little bit more a sort of code first approach. But there may be some exceptions to that rule, and we're looking at tools that kind of may create a sort of hybrid mode, where you know, it may not be like drag and drop exactly, but you know, may make you feel a little bit more at home if that's kind of what you're used to. But yeah, so you know, right now there's still a lot of possibilities tooling wise, but I wouldn't expect this anytime soon. Diane Rubin says, is there any plan to support API less than 21? How complex will it be? Yeah, probably not. We did investigate this at some point. and I forget exactly what the conclusions were, but I think we ended up deciding that that we wouldn't support less than 21. If this is like a huge deal for you, you know, let me know. Like reach out to me on Twitter or something. I'd like to understand, like why, like what, you know, what app you're supporting and what your user base is, and you know, the different kind of factors for you. Let's see. I think maybe I should end it there. I've got to go do a few things. So yeah, this has been a ton of fun. I'm glad to be streaming again. Thankful for all of you hanging out. I don't know when I'll be on next. I'll try to maybe, you know, do another one soon. But I've been pretty busy at work, and it hasn't exactly been stuff that I can work on openly. So, you know, it's been hard for that reason. You know, also just my house is a mess right now, and we've been remodeling and stuff, and it's been really noisy and crazy. So, anyway, hope I will be able to do it more. Appreciate all of you, and yeah, hope you all check out Compose Beta and like it, and have fun with it. Cheers.